welcome to episode 9 of Under the Pallet Wrap. In light of the feedback and the comments we've been having, today we're going to talk about warehouse automation, as that was a request from somebody this week and for us to have a conversation around this topic. So the question we're going to ask ourselves is, should all warehouse operations have a goal to be automated? And let's be honest, it's a topic that if you're talking warehouse operations, you can hardly get through a conversation without it coming up. Everybody discusses it. Everybody considers it. It's like an unstoppable wave of development at the moment. A great hunger for these technologies. You can't go to a warehousing exhibition without being flooded and amazed by some of the solutions that are out there and being offered. Providing you with solutions for your productivity, for your accuracy, for your handling complexity, for your lack of available labor, and for, simply doing more in less. So today we're asking the question, should all operations be looking at automation? And Keith, what do you think?
I think, as you can imagine, that warehousing operations, e-commerce, business is a variable beast, and what works for some does not necessarily work for all. I think I always take the position that, of course, you should be efficient. That's my driver. Efficient, customer centric, continuous improvement mindset. Sometimes that leads you to automation. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that could be to the detriment of your business. I'm pro automation when it works. I'm fascinated by the subject. It's something that you spent many a year working on. What would you say the main drivers were for automation for most businesses? Because growth is the big word, isn't it? But growth isn't necessarily the right reason. What would you say is the bigger driver?
I've been involved in a lot of automation work. My specialism within supply chain has always been warehouse operations, and through that I have done a number of significant developments that have involved automation, but not all of them. Some of them we chose to not do it, and I think what you see is probably three key focuses that drive people to think about automation. One is productivity. We want to do more. We want to get more through. We want to get more things done with the people that we have. Secondly is accuracy and consistency. And I think that is probably one of the greatest successes of automated solutions is they're very, very consistent and accurate. They drive adherence to process, which it can be very, very helpful depending on what you're doing. And then the third one is being able to utilize space better. So you've got a warehouse, it's full, you don't really want to expand, or you don't have room to expand. So you look at solutions to how to utilize that space better. Your storage can become much more dense if people don't need to come in and out of it all the time. So there are great opportunities, and automation was traditionally the exclusive right of big business. Automation solutions were multi-million-pound projects. They involved cranes, they involved miles of conveyor, they involved big sortation machines. So, you needed to be a big business to justify all of that. But that's simply not the case anymore. With the onset of much more modular and more autonomous solutions. So I mean things like, and this is kind of the robotics side. So where you would once had a conveyor to get from A to B, you can now use what we would call an AGV, which is a manless truck, which can pick up a pallet or pick up some boxes, and it can take it to another point in the warehouse without any human intervention. And that presents a whole different opportunity and a whole different wave of solutions. and it also lowers the barriers for entry. So much smaller businesses can benefit from automation. So I guess to our question, should all have the goal? No, I don't think they should, but they could benefit from it.
Yeah, it's definitely a long journey from startup to full automation. And yeah, sometimes it confuses me when people are talking about automation. Is that what they mean in the traditional sense? Because I have spoken to ops directors and COOs who have been adamant that that's what the business needs. Full automation. I've been looking at the warehouse and I'm thinking, really? Um, how have you come to that conclusion at this stage? Because there's a load of stuff that comes before these decisions, and lots of different improvements you can put in place, such as pick to light, or you can automate label printing, you can automate different elements of the supply chain, semi-automation, but full automation, fully mechanical, robotic. That's a big shift,
It
and
is.
I think there's a journey before you decide that a burgeoning business is already ready for that full automation. I think you should know what you're spending your time and money on in great detail before you start ringing the automation bell.
I have a mantra that I have used many times with companies when I'm talking to them about the possibilities of, when we're talking about new solutions development, and one of the options could be automation. And that is that I always start the conversation with never automate a mess. If your operation is struggling, it's a bit chaotic, not the best plan, please don't think that automating it is going to fix that. It doesn't. It just accentuates the problem. It just means you'll be able to do more mess, and it'll make a bigger mess in the same space. I think if there are two things that I would say to people when they're considering automation, one is you need to know how your operation works in detail. It should be process driven, it should be written down, you should understand it. And the second is you should have a very clear understanding about what your objectives are. What do you think you're going to achieve by automating? And you need to be really, really tough on yourself to make sure that you actually are going to achieve that. Because I've seen this many times, is once you start going down the road into automation, it's really exciting. It is, talk about kids in a sweet shop, and or in a toy shop is probably even better analogy, is that there's this world of amazing solutions, and it's really exciting. Running an automated warehouse is exciting. It's also, if it's not going well, incredibly stressful, and I've written about that before. So I think you need to be really clear on those two things. And if you really don't have a good grasp on what's causing your operation problems. Because you might just think, oh, I've just got too much business. If I could automate, I could be able to do more through this space. Maybe it could well be true, but you really need to understand what is the bottleneck, what is causing the problem. Because sometimes, as you say, just a little bit of planning or a little bit of change in the process, and you can unlock that problem and continue it through. And then for automation isn't what you needed.
Yeah, I've seen it myself where the goal for 2 years' time is full automation. But when I've really got into the nitty gritty, the understanding how many people are currently on inbound, for example, and seeing their lack of visibility has been almost like the major cost saver of the year. Providing them with visibility of what orders are coming in, and then everything else flows from there. If you
Yeah.
don't know that, how much you're spending and why, and what is prohibiting your development, yeah, you're right. That's very thin ice. That's dangerous territory. If you think about automation in any which sense, any element of your life, it's like the phrase "the sledgehammer to crack a nut." You know, um, you get hot one day a year in your house. oh, I'm going to change I'm going to put air conditioning throughout my whole house and come up with a complicated heating system. It
You
doesn't solve the
appreciate it
problem
today?
of buying a fan. So it's
Yeah.
yeah,
It,
I mean, it's very exciting, as you say, very, very
it really
exciting.
is.
And efficiencies and process improvements are very exciting to me. And when automation is the solution, I mean, what a great thing to be involved in, so much learning. But it's just as satisfying sometimes building a communication plan or SOPs or bringing the team together or connecting the dots or and even that journey of understanding where the biggest costs are, and understanding. I worked on a packaging project once where I managed to save something like 360K, and it was through reducing elements and automating parts of the process. The
Yeah.
void field, getting rid of the tape in full, but reducing the non-value added step. If we hadn't thought that way, we might have brought in a packing machine and
Yeah.
very specific machines and doesn't suit every scenario.
It doesn't. And, automation does not replace good management. And if you don't manage it and you don't have good understanding of what's going on, it's a disaster and it will destroy what you do. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
can't see the stock within the automated warehouse. You can't see it. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, because you can't go in and just find it, right? Like in an old warehouse, you can't just go walking through the racking because most of the racking doesn't have any aisles in it because you removed them to make it more dense and to use cranes. And therefore, you can't just go and look. You absolutely need that clarity of process. And going back to this the objectives of why you automate, you get this, oh, I just want to automate a process. I just don't want to deal. I have so many people issues. Just automate it and take away the people, right? I've been doing this in pretty much for the last 25 years, and I've never seen a manless operation. The closest I came was with an ice cream warehouse where it was connected to a manufacturing plant where basically it just produced pallets of ice cream, and these things were built on the production line. They were automatically loaded into vehicles. It went across the yard, or a few hundred meters. These pallets were automatically unloaded from a truck and then went into a high bay warehouse, oxygen suppressed because they had no reason to break a pallet ever. It only ever went out in pallets. So came in full pallets, was put away into a high bay, no lights, no oxygen in there whatsoever. And then when it was called out, it was always called out in pallet quantities. So it came out via pallet conveyor and was then on the way out was loaded by somebody onto the truck, and they had a team of maintenance obviously to keep it going. Now that's the closest I have ever seen to a autonomously automated warehouse, and that's because they never had to touch the product, never. Right? And so literally when they used to go in and do maintenance, they had to wear oxygen masks because there was no, and the reason it's oxygen suppressed is because it used less electricity as the cranes run up and down the aisles. There's less resistance, would you believe, because there's no oxygen. So the air was create less resistance, and it saved them money on electricity. So it was an incredible, it's just basically a black box.
Very long journey to make something as intricate as that work as it did, and a very specific problem to solve. A perishable product where human touch can actually be detrimental to the product. So it goes without saying, they need to develop their own solutions there. One of the most effective automations I've ever seen, and the guy who developed it was justifiably proud of it, was when I worked in the flower industry, and it was at the flower market, and well, the whole market was connected by the conveyor belts and an automated scanning system. Flowers, I mean, the timescales involved in the flower industry are like you've never seen before. The auction begins at something like 4 a.m. They've all got to be on trucks by 5. It's an overnight business, but it's got to move fast. It's perishable products. You can't have any mistakes. that would have been done very traditionally for many, many years. People would wheelbarrows, barrows, trolleys, mixed up flowers here, there, and everywhere. Uh, it was a very efficient solution that joined the entire auction and the market together. Necessary to bring the industry forward, and you had to take your hat off to him. It was an amazing achievement. Um, but again, he knew the industry intricately. He knew exactly what he was trying to solve, and he could not scale the business without that automation because he would have had to rely on manual workarounds forevermore for human mistakes. People relying on shouting, really, to get messages across. So that was very impressive. Have you ever seen? I think I know what you're going to tell me here, Dan. Have you ever seen an automation that did not achieve what it set out to?
Yeah, yeah. I could give you a whole list of stories, but let me talk about one that I did. I worked in South Korea many years ago when I was with Tesco. Tesco bought a company in South Korea. Their supply chain, so it was a hypermarket retail business, so big stores, big SKU range, took big deliveries. And it was basically a direct to store model when we first bought the business. And they wanted to centralize the distribution to reduce the amount of deliveries going into store. Now, South Korea is a hugely expensive labor market. So they were like, okay, so let's use some automation. We've had some success with it in the UK. Maybe we can do that. And so I was asked. I just finished a big project in the UK, and I was asked to go to South Korea and manage this project to introduce centralized distribution for the first time. And they wanted it automated because the cost of people was so high, and it was so high. So great project, really exciting. So we scoped it out. This is the business. They had 30 hypermarkets. They were going to grow to 60 over the next 5-8 years, something like that. So suppliers were bringing it in. We would receive it, pick it to order, and it would be distributed out. So we built a massive sortation system. It was 300 meters long in this warehouse, incredible thing. And basically, what came in was just basically at the back of the truck. You just chucked it onto conveyors. It went through a scanning system, worked out what it was, placed it against an order, saw the demand against it, and then sorted it to a store. And it was great, and it worked very well. I was very proud of it. And we were doing a lot of productivity, but things were changing with the internet and everything. They started to build convenience stores. So where they had a business plan to have 60 hypermarkets, within about 2 years of that, they had maybe 40 hypermarkets, but they had 100 convenience stores. Now suddenly they have this sortation system that had maybe 30 chutes, and you could have different stores at the end of each chute, but designed to have big orders go into big stores. And then suddenly the business model was small orders to many more small retail outlets, and it didn't work anymore. It was less productive and actually very difficult to be able to distribute to all those stores at the same time. 5 years after they'd spent multiple millions on that, they ripped it out and went back to painting lines on the floor.
Biggest issue, some of the biggest issues I've seen is that lack of flexibility. Building for a particular size operation or a particular scenario, but different parts of the business grow and they haven't been accounted for, so they haven't got the allocation of space or pick faces, etc. And then, in the world of acquisitions and mergers, everyone's trying to exit these days. Business models change regularly. Um, it's not uncommon for someone to be acquired and for the model to be to change dramatically. Sometimes the it's all been taken into account. It's been weighed up as a necessary thing. But how do you factor in change when you're building automation in your experience? How can you
Yeah.
at least future proof it
I
for
think
as long as the
there's
return of investment is there?
important points to make here. Firstly, um, automation is much more flexible and agile today than it used to be. It's very much less bolted down heavy machinery and is much more now agile, movable solutions. So that would be the first thing. So the technology has moved on and you have a lot more. You can reprogram something over a weekend and it will change what it does in its entirety. The other thing I would say is because of that, that you're not bolting everything to the floor. And I think that, I said earlier, this very simple example of where you used to have a conveyor running from A to B. Now you can just have a manless truck or a manless little robot running between the two. And if you decided that actually you wanted it to go somewhere else, you just have to reprogram it and go somewhere else. Um, and you've not made the commitment, so you immediately have something which is more agile and more modular, right? So nowadays, I would always encourage an operation to say, sometimes they go into a new site and it's greenfield, it's a little bit of a different discussion, but the majority of the time you're trying to adapt an operation while you're in it. And, I always say, just create yourself a bit of space, set up a portion of your warehouse under a new solution using, some form of the right solution of robotics, and how we get to that is a different story, but you can modularize it, so you can just take one portion, say 10% of your business, run it through a solution. Is it good? Yes. Is it good? No. Okay, so what can we do to it? How can we adjust it? How can we change it? you know there are a lot of solutions that you don't even have to buy. You can lease and rent robotics now. So if you get it wrong, you can just take it out and change it, and you've not committed to buying it and doing it a certain way so it's modular, so you can change it, you can add to it, you can relocate it within your operation without too much difficulty. The programming of these machines and the configurations of them are much more user friendly and capable these days, so you can do different things with the same equipment. So the risk, you don't have to, absolutely say, right, I'm doing it this way for the next 10 years because that's how long it's going to cost to pay this back. You can get going, and then it can be amended and adjusted as you grow. So I think it has become a much more fluid, modular, and flexible.
Well, it probably had to adapt, didn't it? Because a lot of scare stories probably found people weren't investing in these permanent um, solutions as readily. Um, I think sometimes people forget that when it comes to building the automation, you take on board the maintenance team as well.
Yeah, I think it's very easy when you're designing automation solutions, and you're working on your business case, so you've understood what you're investing and the productivity gains, or the extra volume that you can get through the warehouse, or the amount of checking that you can remove because you have an accurate picking process that doesn't make errors. All these things, great savings, savings, savings. One of the really common problems is people don't consider that there are certain things in your warehouse that will go up enormously, and facilities and maintenance is probably the most extreme one. Most warehouses, you have an old guy who does the facilities, he changes light bulbs and he oils the forklifts, and I may be being a little bit unkind, but it's a very, in a manual warehouse where you're just maintaining a few forklifts, changing some legs on the racking when someone bangs into it, changing light bulbs and things like that. It's not a critical part of the operation. You go to automation, that facilities manager becomes one of the most important people in your leadership team. because the way that that's approached, automation maintenance has to be done on a preventative basis. So you have to cycle it in, you have to plan it into your day or into your week. And the uptime of that automation is a really, really important metric, because if it's down for 4 hours a day, it's never going to pay for what you do. So that facilities person suddenly becomes a very highly important member of your
Well,
team. Probably
so
pay a very different skill set to what it is. And then, you don't have a couple of people changing light bulbs. You have an entire maintenance team which are electrically, mechanically skilled. So it's a big expense, right? So for all the benefits that you're taking from your solution, you have to build in that you have to put this very much highly skilled team in place. Planning and analytics, a completely different field once you get into this. Running an automated warehouse is effectively running a production line. That's the way you have to perceive it. You are basically changing your traditional warehouse to a production line, because what you do in one part of the warehouse completely is affecting the rest of it. It's all connected. And you have to completely shift your mindset. And there are expenses and there are cost of carrying the spares, huge amount of money. But overall, generally, if you've done your business case right, it still provides you. I mean, we're being quite, I guess, challenging with this. Automation done right is a game changer. I mean, there are some incredible examples of solutions that really make a huge difference. And I don't want to sound, I've made my career out of
no, it's
delivering
just
these
approach with
solutions, but
caution.
it's
I've
so
been at
important to do it for the right reasons.
I've been at work before when the automation is packed in. I think it was to do with the generator running out of fuel. Again, we're talking about a facilities manager having a different skill set. I mean, obviously that was a bit of an oversight. But yeah, it closed down. Whereas in the past you would improvise and look to the people. What can we do a bit different? In this case, when all the stock is within the automation, there wasn't really much that could be done apart from fix it
Yeah, running a factory.
at cost. And yeah, so it's always worth. Yeah, you've got to be on the ball. Um, it becomes a bit easier. It's amazing how many businesses don't have a contingency plan for any circumstances, let alone uh, a power outage. But yeah, that was an interesting thing. I mean, the looks of horror when everyone realised that nothing was working, and realising that the only fix was to fix it. Um, there was no way
Yeah,
we could just get down on the floor and do something a bit different, and everyone picked by hand. It had changed.
it's another good example of why you shouldn't go into automated solutions lightly. For all your solutions, all the things you put in place, you need to have contingencies for. Power outages, in the past, okay, so you went on to emergency lighting, you could still operate, right? But if all the machinery goes off, you've got a big problem, which is why automated warehouses should always have 100% backup generation. And they
Yeah.
should always make sure that the bloody tanks are full of fuel so you can actually run it. If you can, and this is where we've talked a little bit about the importance of going into it with great clarity as to what it is you're trying to achieve, and making sure you have a good understanding of what you do before you do it. A really important things to start with. Beyond that, the process of designing what is the right solution, what the solution should cover and what it shouldn't cover. So because that comment full automation is very rare. You normally have what you might call uglies that just don't fit, and you have to run them. You have to have a manual side to your operation as well. That design and process. One is designing solutions, and the first thing I would say is be very careful. If you're an operation, you go to an automation company and ask for a solution, because and I'm not being hard on automation companies. It's just the reality of the situations. An automation company will sell you a solution that they'll tell you is the best one. Of course, they'll tell you it's the best. It's their. But automation companies don't provide an end-to-end solutions for everything, right? So sometimes they have to adapt their solutions to work for what you want. So you think, okay, they're telling me this is great. brilliant. But if you went and asked another automation company, they might do something very different because what they provide is different. And then it becomes really difficult. So, well, this guy says I should use this type of automation. This guy says I should use this type of automation. How do you make that decision? I would always encourage people to find some independent expertise that has got the experience of working with these various different solutions to be able to just take what you want and tell you what in the market is most suitable without any skin in the game, right? If you've got, if you're going to sell, because even you get the integrators that take multiple solutions and put them together. Most of them still have partnerships with these companies, and they will always go to certain companies first. But find some independent expertise that can really validate what it is that you need and provide you with a clarity over what the right solution is and what not to automate. Because there are certain things that you just like, you know what, 80% of your business would work really well, but this 20%, don't touch it. It will be a disaster. So training, it takes adjustment, configuration. People need to see this as a long-term strategy rather than I put it in and I mean I can cut my people in half and I'm great. It just doesn't work like that. When you get it right, you have a long-term goal and you have strategic perspective on it, you can deliver incredible. I've seen productivity improvements in the tens of percent, 20-30% improvements because they really thought it through and got it right. I've also been to some operations where I had a really interesting one. I worked for a promotions company. We used to sell promotional items. We worked with a retailer in Denmark. And they had this incredible automated warehouse. It's so much kit in it. It was incredible. I remember being in a meeting with them and they asked me if I could go and source a different warehouse and deliver this product to store independently of their supply chain because their warehouse was so expensive. They had bought so much equipment and they had automation to do everything. It became very restrictive and very expensive to run. Then they actually asked us to set up a
It
separate
didn't deliver the efficiencies in the long run. Yeah.
I mean, it was just like mind blowing. But that's the price of getting it wrong. But of course, this was a multi-million-dollar, investment. They were stuck with it for the next 15 years, probably. But at the time, it was about a year or so old at that time. Is that they couldn't make it pay. It was costing them more than their old manual warehouse was costing, and that's the price of getting it wrong.
Absolutely. And we both work places where you get the tacked on processes, um, new products that don't fit the automated flow, so they need a
Yeah,
manual workaround. Certain specialist packing or labeling requirements like dangerous goods that weren't factored in. So need workaround processes. Teams developing around the add-on processes. Glitches in the flow developing into teams that cover that glitch. Seen all sorts. I mean, it's all part of the journey. It's not right or wrong. They make for some good memories, but yeah, it also goes to show. And speaking to the people who do the job and involving the right stakeholders as well is essential. I mean, trying to develop automation without speaking to warehouse staff is a absolutely like assuming you know the pain points from spreadsheets is
you're absolutely right. I think yeah, it's a game changing um, project to take on in the right circumstances. So if you know what your challenges are and you know how your operation works, you have very clear, realistic goals, and you employ the professionals to make sure that the decisions are right, the deployment is right. I've got a number of operations. I did one 27 years ago that is still running and it's still delivering.
that must be give you a lot
It's
of pride.
incredible. The staying power of that. And it was. I have huge pride in knowing that operation is still going now. It was the first big one I ever did, and it's still running, and that's incredible. And that has that
Well, it did the
that
job.
hey?
It did the job it was
But
intended to
it's
do,
doing
and
the
it did
job,
it
right?
well. Sometimes I think people will be surprised if you go behind the doors of some of the big names or massive businesses, and they'll be surprised how little automation there
Yeah,
sometimes is. It really does depend. If it's efficient, it's efficient. It's obviously things like the parcel carriers, their warehouses are phenomenal. They couldn't operate without automation. The scale of those operations, and they're amazing to see. But sometimes simplicity is what drives effectiveness, and you'll see some well-organized warehouses and systems in place. I've seen some beautiful warehouses that are just the cleanest warehouse you'll see, and that is part of the beginning of their efficiency journey.
yeah,
Sorting, cleaning, routine, that is the first step, and they can see everything that's happening.
yeah,
Um, I love the design of some warehouses where a simple mezzanine gives you such a good view of what's happening. That's a game changer. It, it's all sorts of things you can do, and it's a very exciting world, and it continues to be one, and that's why we love it so much. You know, there's
yeah.
so many
Absolutely,
examples.
absolutely. But I will just say again, we asked at the top, should all operations be considering it? Consider it, sure, but should they all do it? No. I can remember I was working somewhere, and when I joined, they had this design for a big FMCG sort of grocery retail warehouse, which said that this incredible automated solution. And when I joined, we went through this process of analysis, and I ripped it up and told them to not do it, save the money. And what we did, we continued to have a standard, traditional, wide-aisled warehouse, but we just deployed very smart, paperless, and geolocated technology, so it kept everybody busy and always productive wherever they were. So whenever they finished an assignment, and these warehouses are like 200,000 square feet. They're massive places, right? You can be half a mile from one end to the other. So when you finished your assignment at one end, it immediately dropped you another one based on where you were in the warehouse. So immediately you could start picking. So it just meant that the people were productive all the time. And that made it very, very flexible, could ramp up and down with volume. It was absolutely fantastic. And it was by far the best solution for the task that they had.
You
There are
referred
many
to
other
Tim
operations
Wood.
where you'd rip all that out and you'd put in a load of technology, but it's not always the answer. And these
No,
things these things
you were able
vary
to
based on what
reduce.
they are.
You were able to reduce one of the seven wastes, as they call it, and that was motion. Always look at the
Quite
waste
often
and the
used.
blockers and what's prohibiting you from performing as you should. And I think almost to circle back to your answer, no, my answer's the same. Um, some things can be solved in a different way, in a
Yeah,
simpler way. Before, one day you might explore automation in full, but it's not always the right time. Sometimes it's too soon, and there's plenty you can do on the ground. You almost need to make sure your house is in order, everything's operating to the best of your capacity or ability before you invest in the rest.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head with you make sure your house is in order. You need to have control and understanding of your operation before you go down this road. And you know, it's not a scale thing anymore. Some quite small operations can benefit from a degree of automation, and automation is not an on-off switch. It is a sliding scale of engagement, and there are some very, very effective, low-cost automation solutions that relatively small businesses can get great benefit from. So it's really a case of understanding what your operation is, how it works, where your pinch points are, and sometimes an automated solution is right to fix that pinch point. Sometimes it's just a layout problem. Sometimes it's a configuration of your WMS. But So you don't have to be you don't have to be Amazon, you don't have to be Tesco, you don't have to be General Electric to benefit from automation. There are some amazing solutions that are very good for smaller businesses. You just
Absolutely.
need to know your business first.
You can also be a very big business who's semi-automated, but it's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
knowing and understanding why and where and how. So that's
The best solutions are a combination of machine and human. It's a collaboration that makes it work. It's optimal. Anybody who thinks that automation can't help, or everything needs to be automated, it's always wrong. It's always the degrees in between, and it's a collaboration between man and machine, person and machine, to be a little bit more politically correct, I guess. But that's where they work the best.
uh, AI in itself is an automation of different processes. It's never been more relevant. Know why you're using it and what you want to enhance. But this has been a very interesting chat. We knew it would be. It was always on our list, but thanks. The gentleman who requested we talk about this, keep your suggestions coming because that's what we want. We want to chat about what people in supply chain want to know about and people outside of supply chain, buyers, founders, anyone who wants to learn. Keep your suggestions coming. We, as you can tell, are more than happy to talk about any supply chain subject in depth. So for now, um, goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this episode and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about a subject that is very close to my heart and that has driven most of my career. I've enjoyed it. Can't wait to hear your comments. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and all those things that make podcasters happy. Um, Thanks for listening. Speak to you again soon.